Well, welcome to the first podcast of 2026 with myself, Mark Randall, and fellow host Stephen Goldstein, just along with us in the room here. We're going to start off with a bit of a fascinating reflection, but also a very big title, and it's about market mayhem, how elite traders profit from chaos while everyone else panics. Now, it's something to get our teeth into, and we're looking forward to dive into this. And perhaps, Steve, what we see is an awful lot of people out there panicking. We know that across the sphere of people that are trading in the market, particularly those that are coming to it new, that panic appears to be their middle name. But there's a lot of things that we can learn from certainly some of the people that we interact with professionally, the people that I think collectively do sit as the elite traders in the space. And really it's for us to sort of reflect a little bit on some of the stories that of these individuals that we've picked up upon. For me, I think there's the sort of common denominator is that they all seem to have a great comfort in being comfortable with not knowing. They're okay with not knowing. They certainly have to have an attitude of treating trading like a business and not a gamble. And I think there's so many people coming into space that gets treated as sort of some game. And certainly the elite traders are putting the effort in, and they realize that there's no quick way of really gearing yourself up for, trading effectively. And I think my own view is that too many people come into the space, I guess, looking for a quick win. They're looking for an easy solution. I think some of them getting trapped by the world of technical analysts, where they'll see a chart and they go, oh, look, I could have done this there and that there, and those lines crossed there, and that seems so easy. Let's just use that. But they don't do it with any discipline. They don't do it with any management of self. They get lost. And of course, if you backtest moving averages, it looks fantastic that you'll make money everywhere. But in reality, that it's not like that. The entry points are very different. The pain thresholds where things go against you immediately are things that people are just not built to cope with. But the elite traders don't make those mistakes. They realize, those things happen as part of the normal course of events, and they're getting their head around it to express themselves in a different way, having different mental gears for different market terrains. And so agility and flexibility are part of their DNA. So that's where I start off with. So I'm going to throw it out to Mr. Goldstein, and perhaps a question, Steve. I think we've got some examples from our own coaching work to reflect upon, but what stands out for you in perhaps a chosen individual that is the differentiator, that can be comfortable and take profit from chaos whilst everyone else is losing their heads?
So yeah, it's a great question, market mayhem, fantastic question. It's what does that actually mean? Markets are often in a state of mayhem for short periods, sometimes slightly prolonged, but it can mean other things. We think of mayhem as craziness. You can often say that's markets all the time, particularly if you look at certain markets. Last year, certain markets went crazy for short periods. Other one had extended long periods.
Yeah, it's always something bonkers going on somewhere. I think mayhem is sort of perhaps the way it is.
We'll return to the podcast shortly. Just want to welcome everyone listening today to the AlphaMind Podcast. It's great to have existing listeners back who have been with us over these past 7 years, and to welcome some new listeners who may be joining us for the first time. We just want to introduce our podcast sponsor and partner, the Society of Technical Analysts, the STA, who've supported this podcast over the past few years. And we're delighted to be able to offer a discount on their brilliant home study course. And for people who don't know, the Society of Technical Analysts are the world's leading body for the advancement of technical analysis education. They're a not-for-profit body, and their lecturers and teachers include some of the world's leading technical analyst experts. And they've been a key part of putting this home study course together. So if you want to know more about that, go to their website, technicalanalysts.com, or do go to our website if you want to find out how to get a discount on that course. Our website is alpha-mind.net. Now, let's get back to the podcast. It's normal. In fact, that's how a lot of people make money, because valuations on markets, on asset classes, on prices, they change so much. And mayhem can mean different things in different markets. We had the mayhem last year when Donald Trump did the tariff announcements, Freedom Day. We've had periodic mayhem in certain other markets at various times. People could say that mayhem is still going on in the bullion, in the precious metals markets at this very moment, even though it seems to be largely a one-way move. You know, we're getting moves that, 5%, 10% a day almost. When most of the time those markets barely move, or historically, when you look back at them, they've been in very tight ranges for large periods. In recent years, almost every market has had either short periods or extended periods of mayhem. Just think of energy markets after the Russia invasion. Most markets during the early days and through much of 2020 and COVID. Of course, the GameStop saga. Trading is almost a constant battle of mayhem. And how do we manage ourselves within it? It's another question, because as you were talking there about the idea of panic, it's an interesting phrase. What do you mean by panic?
What do I mean by panic?
Yeah.
Well, I think you just lose control, don't you? You're sucked into the noise, getting damaged by it generally. I mean, there seems to be, if there is panic, you're suffering. So you're not engaging with it in a way where you've got some control and you're enjoying it. I think that certainly, if I go back to the pit trading days, when did we enjoy absolute panic and fast market? No, it was absolute. It was awful, and you felt pain and you saw pain. You smelt it on the floor. And so there's a big emotional response to panic that I think is not useful. That if you're not in emotional control of yourself, panic destroys your discipline. It destroys your process. It takes you're suddenly looking at reactions rather than taking a step back and having a strategic view of things. So I think it can give people it changes people. I think people might be in fight or flight themselves, so it's adrenaline. The ego might be suddenly getting kicked off by the chemical response within the body as you react to this. You react badly to what's going on. I think it's how you react to it. 'Cause I think some people's panic might be other people's. This is pleasure. This is lovely. And so I think it's down to the individual. And I think if you're a seasoned professional, you may not see it as panic, whilst the person new to the market may just think it as total pandemonium. And it's the experience that's defined the difference as to how we sort of see something and then evaluate it and say, well, yeah, this is difficult, this is crazy, and I'm now panicking as a result. So I think it's a response to something. So it's how we respond to something.
Okay. So interestingly, I've just asked AI, or one of the AI engines, to define panic. And And it said it is an intense, overwhelming fear that triggers irrational decision making and impulsive actions. In markets, it causes mass selling, abandoning strategy, and following the crowd rather than logic. So that's a
It's
great
sort
answer,
of right. I
isn't it?
mean, it's right in places. We know what AI is like. Certainly the first bit of it was pretty much as we summarized.
Yeah, I,
I
I, I
wouldn't
would.
say it creates mass selling because it can be the other way around. It can be mass movement of any kind, not
Well, you could
necessarily
you could
selling.
you could almost say what's happening in silver is a mass panic because people are fearing they're missing out.
Yeah, you can get panic buying, you can get panic selling, you can get
Yeah,
panic uncertainty of all sorts of things.
yeah,
Um, and I think the market might be panicking in a sense that the crowd is panicking, but elite traders are there observing objectively what's going on and are not panicking. They're not, the non-elite traders are panicking with the panic. And so that, I guess, creates a whole bunch of noise. It also creates a problem for the market because all sorts of very, very peculiar orders are coming into the market from people that are panicked, trading panicked conditions. So it almost adds to the volatility. And we certainly, back in the day, we saw flow from, you could see what panic flow looked like. And it was very different to professional flow, which sort of stood back, it considered, it waited. Panic flow was like, had a character of its own.
okay. So I'm going to pose a question which I've just asked AI as well.
Oh my God.
Is there a good way to panic?
Is that a good way to so panicking carefully? I don't know.
it came
What
up
does
with a
it say?
term. It came up with the term controlled urgency. It said panic by definition involves losing control and making irrational decisions. However, controlled urgency is valuable, acting decisively under pressure whilst maintaining rational thinking.
Well, it's sort of what we said, right?
That staying calm, following preset plan. It's interesting because this is what we
Keeping your
talked about
head.
nearly for 7 years. This
Hmm.
concept, and we banged on and on and on about it, of being present
Yeah,
and
about
staying
self.
present. Of you use that term fight, flight, and of course the other one is freeze
And faint.
and faint. Yeah, and the four Fs, the four deadly Fs. But we're all at times we have a challenge because we are actually prone to those. They're effectively
Yeah.
we're that they're environmentally um, developed behaviors for survival. The idea of freezing is, if you're out looking for food and you suddenly hear something in the grass, it could be a tight snake, it could be a tiger, whatever, the natural environments, you
Yeah.
freeze for a purpose. You don't know what it is. You don't want to move. You don't want to create disturbance. You see animals do it. It's a natural response in the natural environment. Fainting, and there are animals that faint as a life-saving
Yeah.
life-saving mechanism for them.
Rabbit stuck in the headlights, that sort of type of thing.
Yeah, that doesn't work on
Freeze.
the road, but it
I've
works for
seen
rabbits.
I've seen faint in trading rooms.
Yeah, there's animals that play dead. They actually faint
Mm.
and play dead so that they're not attacked. Hopefully not eaten, but not attacked. Um, Freeze, flight, of course. You know, you
Run
got
away.
you got a wolf coming at you, you run. You try and get up the nearest tree.
So I think it's just going back to this. It's about the response, isn't it? The
Yeah.
response to panic. And I think that thinking about it, even the seasoned professional for a moment might panic
Oh, they do,
for a
undoubtedly.
moment, but their ability to reset and recover and realize that they need to get back to, optimal, cool, calm, and collective. I think it's their ability to do that, and they've got some discipline, they've got some rituals around doing that. So they're in much better control of themselves and prepared for when and panic will arise again in markets. So, every 10 minutes it's panicking. So they've got a plan for it.
Well,
They
it's
realize
an
but they're not get sucked into it.
no, it's an inevitability. We're going to face, this job by its very nature. You're working with something which is so random, so uncertain, so chaotic at times. It's almost where we go through that ordered market through to a market that starts to go into randomness, and then starts leading towards chaos, and then we lose sight of what's going on and what is the right thing to do in that moment. It's interesting because when I work with people, I talk about there's a danger to panicking, of course, which is where you can miss out on it. It's not just that you can lose money, but actually you can miss out on great opportunities as well. That's the whole
Mm.
point about it. That's why you say the elite traders, so often what they do is they practice staying calm. They practice getting themselves into a mindset for calmness. They have routines and rituals. They all, if I pardon the expression, they all lose it at times. We both coach these guys, and we both work with them. And people seem to think that these guys have ice in their veins and they're not human. They are human, and they do panic and they do lose it.
Mm.
Okay, but what they do is they recover quickly.
Or they seek help to they are vulnerable enough to say, I need some help with something. And you see that in the sports world where people, Zinedine Zidane and all those other people, Tiger Woods even had to recover from some pretty dark places, but they would have engaged with professional help. You
Yeah,
know,
that
and,
dark places. Can I just stop there? Can we go there for a second?
yeah, let's go to
Because a
dark
lot
place.
of people talk to me about, I was in such a dark place in my head at that point, or it took me to a dark place. Okay, so the panic is one thing, but then often it's what happens afterwards
Yeah.
that takes you to these dark places. And I've felt them over the years, and they, the initial panic could be one thing, but it's kind of what you go into afterwards, where you get lost in your head, um, and you catastrophize, and
Well, it trips into your life, doesn't it? So, I mean, your
yeah,
sleep is just going to be like, forget it, right? Your sleep is going to be totally compromised. Relationships suffer, you're walking around in a bit of a stupor and a fog because this stuff lasts, doesn't it? It's sort of, we talk about spirals. You end up being in this spiral that goes deeper and deeper and darker. And yet, somewhere along the line, you're still looking to turn up on a desk and trade.
yeah, and do you know what? If I go back to how I traded in those years, I loved market mayhem. Okay, it's actually when there wasn't enough of it that I had problems.
Yeah, and a lot of, I mean, absolutely. I know some, trade jockeys, I call them, that, they like and they want chaos.
Yeah,
That's their style. I wouldn't say it was the common the common want, but some movement. But it does depend though, because it's how we calibrate market movements to define, well, like I said earlier, your chaos might be my norm, but
100%,
so
a
it's
hundred
how you're
percent.
seasoned.
Yeah,
So if you're in the market 6 months, I mean, every day might look like chaos and panic. Been in the market 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, or, like ourselves, nearly 40 years. Well, people talk about a busy day and you think, that's not as busy as this day back in 1987, where we know what, if you've been around enough, you know what busy is.
yeah,
So you've learned how to respond to that. Um, and you can then evaluate current information much more objectively by thinking, yeah, that's not panic. That's not flight to quality. That's a fairly normal type of movement for a busy day, but it's certainly not panic. So I'm not going to panic with that. So I think people get bothered by different things, is what I'm trying to say. And I think we've all got different, as you always talk about, sort of trading personalities. And I think as a result of that, some of us are much more exposed to, the bad reactions to to busyness than others.
There's a lot of things. I mean, we always think it's the market itself which trips us into some sort of panic or takes us to a dark place. But, like I said, it could be long periods of not much going on, and not, would have been for me not producing P&L, and then slowly slipping into these dark places and projecting that forward. And, this is where this bit of human nature comes in, that we sort of, interpolate what's happened recently into, oh, well, that's going to continue happening.
Yeah, yeah.
So I used to get, I wouldn't say in a panic in the way we're talking about market mayhem, but I'd go to these dark places and I'm like, God, I made money for 3 months, another 3 months of this, then what?
Yeah, so I just want to, whilst you're on that dark place, just talking about you, I just want to ask you some questions about that in terms
Yeah.
of, so it seems like when you were in your dark place at that time, your amount of rumination increased massively. You were looking back with huge disappointment. You were looking forward with anxiety about what am I going to do? How am I going to cope? Collectively, that's not being present, as we know from our present discussions. And you would have, I mean, what did that translate into in terms of behavior and health and performance for you?
Well, you're not present. You're absent. You're not present to the market. Everything is a threat. Opportunities get missed. You execute them badly. So, for example, if I saw an opportunity, I'd be looking at it negatively. So I've got an opportunity here.
So darkness was getting darker, basically.
Well, yeah, it makes you do things. So, okay,
Yeah.
but this, you convince yourself, okay, it may not work. Let's go in small size, and then it works. You're like, oh, what an idiot! Why did I only put
Mm,
that size on? It was
mm.
obvious. It was such a great. I'm a fool. And then you do, then maybe you take your profit quickly. Oh, let's got some money in. And then it goes a long way. Oh, why didn't I just follow my normal process? Then you start questioning yourself. Have I lost it? And, and these thoughts stay in your head. They live with you. You can't always get them out your head. And then you start, my book, Mastering the Mental Game of Trading. This is quite interesting, actually. Okay. I opened the book in the very first chapter with me stuck in one of these periods. Okay. I've been losing money. I've been giving back money. The market's not being kind to me. My style of trading was one that I would have occasional wins, but lose most of the time. So that wasn't normal. But I was in a bad run. And I was sitting at my desk. I remember I threw my pencil down on the floor, my pen or whatever it was I had, and my colleague Ashley, who I mentioned in the book, it was also my the head of the trading desk that we were on. He just looked at me and he went, "You're doing it again, aren't you, Steve?" And I said, "Doing what? What are you talking about?" He said, "That thing you do when you're in a bad run, something like that." And I went, what are you going on about? And he said, that thing where you beat yourself up. And I just went, oh, that. Yeah, you'd be doing that if you were half the idiot that I am, at that point. So I remember that conversation really clearly. And then he said something to me, which was really out of character for him, because he was a great mate, but we just bantered and took the mickey out of each other all day long, and never really said too much serious or comforting. And he just went, I don't get it. He gets, if I had the ability you had as a trader, I wouldn't beat myself up. I cherish it. That, which was, like I said, really unusual for him. And I just looked at him and sort of like, turned around and rolled my eyes and just sat there miserable and fed up, and in that dark place, slumped in my chair, not seeing everything. And he said to me, he said, you're the thing with you, Steve, as a trader, is you're an alchemist, and that's a gift. In other words, you can make money from nothing. And I went home on the train that night, and you get a bit of a reset when you get on the train, your mind. And I'm standing on this crowded train, and he said, it came back to me, that conversation, and I said, did he call me an alchemist? Did he say that I make money from nothing? Because I didn't have any flow, I didn't have any clients or anything. I was just prop trading at the bank, and I suddenly thought, I went, do you know what? He's right. He's not wrong. That is a gift. Why am I beating myself up?
Yeah.
Why am I why am I turning in on myself? Why am I damaging my ability to use that gift that at that point, I think nearly 20 years as a trader, had given me? And I remember just going, no, you stop beating yourself up.
Yeah.
And that was what was taking me. I was in the dark place, and then the beating myself up is what was keeping me there. I was
Mm,
my own worst enemy. I was self-sabotaging. No, the
mm,
market wasn't doing it to me. I was doing it to me. Okay. And then I was panicking, and that was forcing me to beat myself up even more. Whereas I wasn't. It made me defensive, and I don't mean strategically defensive. Like strategically defensive in trading is okay. I'm going to take my size down. There's not much happening, or volatility's increased and it doesn't suit me. I'm turning the risk size down. Not that. That's strategically defensive. Okay. I'm talking about personally defensive, trying to almost save my ego in a way, protect my ego, um, and hiding from the market and not following my process, but trying to grab at low hanging fruit, which is we always know the low hanging fruit is there for a reason. It's sour and it's bitter, and no one else is going to eat it.
rotten.
Rotten, yeah. So that's what, and then that created the panic. As I say, the panic was rarely the market mayhem itself. It was something within me,
Yeah.
inspired by how I was engaging with the market.
Well, I saw something within the team, and this is, I think it was Gulf War Two. Well, certainly that because we experienced Gulf War One and then Gulf War Two, and then all sorts of other things. And it might have been the Afghanistan war. I wasn't sure. I'll have to look back, but it was the night of shock and awe. There was a shock and awe sort of strategy where I think we were watching sort of Bloomberg. It was sort of, I don't know, about 5:30 in the evening, and we were just watching the events. It might have been Baghdad, and suddenly behind the Bloomberg or CNN sort of reporter, buildings started to blow up because cruise missiles were coming in, and it looked pretty intense. Things were just getting taken out. And I always remember that behind me there was a young lady that was watching the screen, and she started to burst out into tears because she was she was following news. She was an analyst. She was following news so closely that she was attached to the news, so that as the news was getting worse and worse, it really it was pulling her apart. I mean, and she was in floods of tears, and we had to sort of console her. And I think that there is this problem with markets, in as much as that if you're in the market, literally trading, you do get very absorbed and tuned in to every piece of news flow that's coming through. Generally, news is negative. If we look at your 10 o'clock news at night, I mean, most of the stories are human suffering, death, disease, and whatnot. I know ITV used to do something at the end of its news at around about 5 minutes before the end of the news. They did something positive, so to try to cheer people up. But the trouble is that sometimes you have to, the ability to tune out, step away, and be an observer rather than being so close that you are part of the news. And I think, and I've certainly seen that in the panic of the 9/11 or whatever, some of those big moments in trading history where it was never been seen before. Even the crash of '87, where we witnessed the impact on markets of 20, 30% down in a day of stocks, and what that did to people, what it did to other markets, associated markets. And if you're not careful, you can get sucked up into that, the emotion of the market to the point it really starts to impact you. And I think seasoned professionals, elite traders, are an observer,
Mm.
and have learnt to observe, and they've learnt to tolerate and to, respond appropriately. People that are new, I think, can have this, go back to that they wanted to know everything. They wanted to tune into everything because they want to find out where the edge is to get the next trade on. And I think that can give them far too much exposure to news, and the news itself becomes a problem, and that's 24/7, by the way. So, they're going home and it's like, oh, well, they're not off. They get on, and 3 o'clock in the morning, they're back on again because something's happened in Asia and it's tuned in, phone's gone off. I need to go back trading because there's news.
So,
Professionals, I think, are calibrating the time they spend trading as well.
so you talk about the question we got here is how elite traders profit from chaos, and whilst everyone else panics in brackets, and really it's about staying calm. That's what you're saying
Yeah,
about not getting owned by the noise,
yeah,
not getting owned by their own inner dark thoughts,
hmm
staying on process, being true to their purpose, um, true to what they're supposed to do in those moments, and that's why they can take advantage of those opportunities and
yeah,
capture the value that is out there in the markets, because only a tiny portion of people really make it to become elite traders. Okay, and they're no different to you. They're no different to you and me. They're no different to everyone else. Everyone has that capability to be that. But I think for a lot of those people, somewhere along the line, they developed a reflex response to those moments. I mean, usually they again, I've seen this with people that I've coached. They went through a transformation or a transition somewhere, how they responded maybe to a particular event because they didn't respond to it well in the past. And they thought, how do I do it this time? And it's an evolution. And it's interesting. I go back to some of our early, well, it's been one of those themes that's happened through our conversations with guests on the podcast. How they struggle in the early years. Mark Minervini last year on his episode talked about, years he blew up several accounts. And we had Linda Rashke on as well, and she talked about blowing up her early account. She didn't quite blow it up. She had to pay back a load of money. She had to earn money just to pay back what she'd lost. Which in a way, that dedication to keeping going, knowing there's a solution, it is also about teaching you how to be, because both of them have learned somewhere during that program how to be the people that profit from the chaos. We'll go back to the podcast in a moment, just to remind you of the Society of Technical Analysts, our podcast sponsors, brilliant home study course. If you really want to go deep into learning about technical analysis from the experts and professionals, this program is the program for you. To find out more about that, go to their website, technicalanalysts.com, and to find out how to obtain a discount on this program, go to our website, alpha-mind.net. Now back to the podcast.
Let me tell you about, this is not his name, but it's going to be called Bob. So let me tell you about Bob. Bob. So, profile. So Bob is probably a very recognizable big corporate American name. People would know him. So I'm coaching this fella. He came to me because he's got a retirement fund that he's now trading. And he wanted some, coaching around trading. Anyway, it went a lot deeper than that. So we went into the self thing and about, the state of self and the opportunity of perhaps recalibrating self, because he was making, even though he came from big corporate America, he was making all the mistakes that we see out there in what we call retail land, because he essentially was retail trading. So making all the mistakes of the retail world, tripping over himself, not seeing a clear picture, churning money, losing money, whatnot. So we went through a process of just understanding, sort of mental agility. There was some meditation involved, there was some visualization involved, and he was getting really into it, really into sort of re-engineering and rewiring how he approached life in general. Right? It's a bigger story than just trading.
Mm.
And so I suddenly got these messages come through. I need to talk. I need to talk. So we had this chat. And what had happened is that it got to the point that I got to about 6 weeks after me embarking on a journey back in '87 to deal with myself. And I found a methodology of creating a different version of me that was calmer, that was more engaging, that was just approaching things with a clearer mind and actually being smarter. And so he wanted this chat, and he just said, "I've just flicked the switch. I've suddenly gone from being the previous person into a new person, literally overnight. So there was a moment, and that took time. So that took a commitment from him to want to embark on the journey of change, to apply various principles. He was using his garden as a point of focus for building a different methodology of being present. And as a consequence to all of this, his trading improved to a ridiculous level because he was suddenly finding a methodology of becoming present. And it was a moment of enlightenment for him. And it was a phone call. It was a bit like a kid that gets found a sweet shop type moment. That when a person phones up and says, I'm now feel that I'm enlightened, and there's a very, very different version of me that's emerged from this. I was getting tingles down my spine thinking, okay, this is as a consequence of this coaching. But it wasn't about, it's interesting, this wasn't coaching to make him a better trader. That was his initial intention. This was coaching to make him a very different, enhanced version of himself. So he could face trading with an entirely different mindset and coping mechanism and observation mechanisms. So he could see opportunity. So he was getting into flow state. I wouldn't say like every day, but very regularly.
Okay, so I want to ask you a question, okay, because that's a lovely story.
Oh, it's amazing.
Thank you for sharing that. But I'm going to ask you something. So you did it to yourself then.
Yeah.
You talked about that and you've shared that story a lot. We've done it when we've done workshops with people and they love hearing that story. You've done it to a client as a coach. You've done it to several clients. I've had clients that have gone through that transformation or a different transformation, some sort of transformation that's had a really big impact on their trading. It's happened to me as a trader many years ago, 25 years ago when I had a coach. It made a big difference, a transformation to me as a trader. Many of my clients, coaching clients, will have gone through the same. I know that. What is happening there? What is the big, what is that, the helicopter view of what is going on and why does that work?
Neuroplasticity.
Okay,
So
that's going on inside the head, yeah.
yeah, so this is essentially a rewire, a firing and rewiring of the brain.
But what precedes that? What is going on that then what we have that neuroplasticity is that changing bit. What is coming? What is the line before there? They go through that and then they're coming out, or we're coming out because, what is not just a scientific term for it, and not just the brain, externally and internally, what is happening? What's happening with how that person engages with the world? That's kind of what I mean. What's changed?
Well, I've often talked about this, the Dorothy and the Wizard of Oz moment, where
Yeah.
suddenly you think, hang on a bit, I've been in a black and white world of monochrome, and that was my normal, and I've just gone through this process, and I realised okay, it's 3D, it's sound surround, and it's HDMI color. I'm now seeing things so differently.
Yeah.
So that's the experience of it, and literally it's a switch. So he witnessed the switch of that door coming down to realizing that actually there's something a lot more interesting out there that I can be curious about and creative about. It's crazy.
It's like the mic drop.
Yeah, yeah.
Right?
I mean,
But
it doesn't happen to a lot of people, but it requires a discipline, and you've got to really stick with the journey. You've got to apply certain things. There's not a lifestyle change, but it's an attitudinal change about how you engage with the present.
it's funny. We talk about elite traders, and I'm going to talk about one of my clients, and I know he won't mind me talking about him because no one knows who it is. But it's a wonderful story that he told me this year, and I worked with him about 3-4 years now, and he's a fantastic trader, private trader, and he is doing extraordinarily well. He's been trading for about, I think, close to 15 years now, but he's had by far his most profitable year last year. Um, you know, multiple seven figures. Okay. Now, when I started working with him a few years ago, he had this drawdown that was in a space for about 5 seconds, about a 25% drawdown of his capital.
Yeah.
He just had this thing he got stuck in, and on an announcement happened, and he couldn't get out of it, and there was no liquidity, and it was disaster for him. Okay. And I remember him being kind of paralyzed, talk about panic. Okay. And that's what panic can do to you. We talk about freeze, kind of the freeze response that happened in his trading over the next 2 or 3 months. And he was in an awful place. Anyway, he did something. He went on a retreat later on earlier that year. After about 2 months, he went on a retreat. It really helped him disengage from electronics, news, data, noise, everything. Which actually is just sideline slightly. If you ever listen to the brilliant Stanley Druckenmiller podcast with the chief of the Norges Bank that was out a couple of years ago, he did something quite similar, actually.
Yeah, I mean, they all do. It's common denominator.
Yeah. It wasn't a retreat, but he went on a sabbatical and just switched himself from
Yeah.
newspapers, and went, I think, on sailing a boat around the world with his family or something for a few months. After a similar event happened to him. Anyway, this guy did a retreat, came back, started trading again. Yeah, just, you know, he kind of said along the lines of, and I might not have the story exactly right, but it was, I want to if I can make half the money back by the end of the year, I'll be very pleased. Okay. So he went back in small, carefully, focused on process and everything. By May, he'd made all the money back, and it was brilliant. And he went on to actually have a very good year in the end. But the funny thing was, as we were talking a couple of months ago, and he was telling me about this year, which has been, an exceptional year, he said, what was really strange, Steve? Because we talked about that event a lot. I had my biggest drawdown this year in June. Okay, biggest ever drawdown. Percentage-wise, not as big as that because he's built his account, but actually numerically a much bigger number. Okay. And he said, what was bizarre was I just went back to trading the next day as if it hadn't happened.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah,
said,
it's response to
yeah. And he said, by the
trauma.
end of that month,
Different.
I'd made it all back and was at the high for the year, just in
Yeah.
that month. And it was almost like it didn't faze him. So in other words, he kind of, it wasn't just that, he'd processed what happened before and he's thought about how to deal with it again, but also an acceptance of the way he trades is liable every now and then to have a very big drawdown. But actually, and we talked about this a lot, he's got a process that works. It's a process that moves from bottom left to top right, if you can imagine a chart.
Mm-hmm.
It generates income. But within that process, there are going to be periodic drawdowns. Every process has periodic drawdowns, and every now and then, an event can happen that could be like an outlier that is going to be, a near catastrophic drawdown. But even functioning that in with all the back tests, when those happen, he still makes money those years. So it makes it easier to therefore accept that, okay, that is it. It's come along. That is the one. It's out the way, move on. I know it's coming, and it's not going to cause me to stop trading. And I'm not going to it's also not going to cause me to stop, to not put a position on, because the fear of panic is part of it as well.
Yeah, it's true. Well, as with Bob,
I'm not going to take this trade, because if it goes wrong, it's going to cost me, and I won't be able to live with myself. So it's almost like the fear of panic is part of the problem, not just the panic itself.
And I think walking towards chaos, knowing that you've got a toolkit embedded within you, gives you greater confidence of.
I love that, Mark. Walking towards chaos.
So walking towards chaos with confidence, because these tools and these behaviors that we coach create a level of intuition that becomes second nature. So you don't have to think about, I need to apply it. They apply themselves as part of your behavior without you thinking about it. It just becomes the way you do it. And that allows you to deal with chaos.
So really what we do as traders, I shouldn't really account me as we, because I just do a couple of small punts every now and then for a bit of fun rather than for a living. But the people we're talking to are either doing it for a living or trying to do it for a living or planning to do it for a living. What they really have to do is to prepare themselves to be able to walk towards and live with chaos, which is unusual, because in most of our life, we do the opposite.
Yeah.
In most professions, in most jobs, okay, perhaps with the exception of people in, say, ambulance, people working in, sort of those sort of environments. But for most of us, we want to eliminate the chaos, which we do anyway when we try and trade anyway with a system, okay? But we don't prepare for when it comes. We try and avoid it. And actually, it's an inevitability, not only in life, but in this world, in trading. It's a much greater inevitability in trading than in normal life. And I think what happens is, especially with new traders, is you go in, you find a system that seems to work, and boom, 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 you're making money. Let's put more on. Let's put more on. This is great. The market's sucking you in, as it does, reeling you in. Oh, look how easy this is. Boom. One day, the whole lot gone. And really, that you're not trading yet at that point, because you've never experienced the chaos of the markets.
No.
You don't know what it can do to you. And then when it happens to you, which is why they always say, fail early and fail fast, okay, is then you start to think, well, how do I do this? And then not only how do I do this, but how do I need to be to do it? And I think this is what a lot of the elite traders have discovered. And
they've solved for their own toolkit to be comfortable with it, and to engage with it and walk towards it, and thus take advantage of it, or not, because their decision is either to trade or not trade. And the decision might be to walk away at this point in time, because this is a little bit too far off the standard deviation curve for me to really risk, my assets trying to trade. So they can make calibrated decisions rather than getting sucked in.
And there's something else here, because we work with a lot of people who are changing environments. I'm mindful of that. So we work with some people who have been managers and salespeople, and then they decide they want to be traders. They some are, like you said, some are retiring, but they're trading differently to how they did in their business life as traders. There's lots of different style of traders. So someone who's been maybe a market maker in a bank for 40 years has never actually run a portfolio, an investment portfolio.
Yeah.
It's a different game. Okay. Someone who's been a market maker has never actually, a lot of work is when they go to work in hedge funds. It's a different game. you're being given an amount of capital and you're not trading with flow and you're not trading on your side of the market. A lot of people in their 20s want to get involved in trading, and it's not a job they've done for. It's not a job they've studied for or learnt for, in their 20s or 30s, and they want to do it because they're smart, they're clever, they're interested in it. But they're coming from a world which was very different, usually a world that was ordered, structured, maybe a job or profession they were doing that was, once they knew how to do it, very few things went wrong. It was just a repeating a process time and time again. And then suddenly they're thrown into this world where they think there is the same in trading, that it's structured and ordered, and that you have a process or a system that can make money out of chaos. But actually, you can't yourself handle it when it happens to you because you've never been thrown into that.
There we are. Well, we'll start to sum up now, I think, from this little chat. Brilliant chat. I mean, I think we do more of the audience will start to see a different version of AlphaMind emerging this year with all sorts of things going on of value and even super high value that will emerge from our work that we're in discussion about. And I'd add that just as a point that once these elite traders have been through the chaos, guess what they're doing? They're reflecting, they're evaluating, and they're refining. So it doesn't just end at the chaos. They actually learn from it and refine and have continuous improvement as part of their strategy.
And they don't just look at what they do. They obviously do look at what they do, but they don't just do that. They look at how they are when they're doing it.
Exactly.
Okay, that's brilliant. Well, Mark, first one of the year out of the way.
Yeah, and to all our viewers, we know there's lots of them, thousands and thousands of them. We understand. Wish you a very, very happy New Year. And obviously, if you're in the Asia area and China, the new year that's yet to come, we wish you good fortune for that. And you'll be hearing from us again soon.
Thank you once again for tuning into the AlphaMind Podcast. It's been our pleasure to talk to you and to share some of our own thoughts and reflections with you today. Thanks again to our podcast partner and sponsor, the Society of Technical Analysts, the FTA. You can check them out on their website, technicalanalysts.com, where you can also find out more about their brilliant home study course. And do remember, if you're interested about that, you can obtain a discount by going to our website and using a discount code. Our website is alpha-mind.net. And if you are interested, either for yourselves or your business, in any of the services that we offer at AlphaMind, be them personal development, coaching, education services, either for you or for the business you're part of, do feel free to reach out to us. Email us at info@alpha-mind.net.